of the equipment you use in your machine tool, your cutting tools, your programming systems, it all has to be treated as one thing. And the work holding is really front and center in that, because to a large degree, it's the work holding that determines the method you're going to use to produce your work pieces.
Welcome to the MTD podcast. I'm Gio and Rowan, presenting today's show, a passionate engineer and a very proud member of the MTD team. Today we'll be looking at ways to maximise your machine tool productivity through work holding, and we've got three special guests in our studio today. We've actually been in the studio, this is our second day now, with First Machine Tool Accessories. We've been producing lots of very special technical corners that will be hitting our MTDCNC platform soon, so keep an eye out for them. Great subject today. We've got three special guests. Our first guest, Richard Evans, the one and only Richard Evans, works at Machine Tool Accessory Technical Sales. Welcome to the podcast, Rich, and a former colleague and friend of mine.
Thank you very much, Joe. Very glad to be here.
And great to have you here, Rich. Second, Alex Newman, another former colleague of mine and friend. How you doing, my friend? Technical sales at First MTA.
Yeah, I'm good, Gio. Glad to be here. It's it's nice to see where you guys are doing this. So
good trip up?
Yeah, it was a good trip up. Well worth it.
Brilliant. Well, we've still got a few technical corners to produce this afternoon. And third but not least, my current colleague and friend, Rowan. How are you?
I won't quite. We've only known each other for about 2 weeks here, Gio, so we'll hold off on the friend for the time being.
Blimey.
No, I'm joking, mate. It's great to be here.
It's a bit harsh.
Oh, sorry. I know. Sorry, mate. You can cut that bit out if you want. It's great to be here. Good to see you as well, mate.
Good to see you, my friend. Now, great podcast again today, as always. Good subject, and we've touched on this subject before. You're only as strong as your weakest link, and really we want to emphasise that the productivity gains that you can get through work holding on your machine tool, no matter what machine tool it is, whether it's a 3-axis machine tool, horizontal, 5th-axis lathe, multitasking lathe, the benefits of work holding are immense. And in my opinion, for the least investment or value in investment, you can get the best return of investment through work holding. Now, before we start this podcast, I want our listeners to learn a little bit about you guys first. So, Richard, can you start, please, by telling our listeners a little bit about you, about your background, why you got into engineering, and what you love about engineering. And I'm sorry about this, but you are an engineering geek, and this should be interesting. So, Richard, off you go.
Well, I've been in engineering now for about 25 years. Fairly soon after I left school, I started working in a motorsports company. And I've done, in that time, everything from sort of shop floor operations up to production management. I've been very fortunate in that I've had a broad variety of different types of roles in different industries, so it's given me quite a broad range of experience. I've also spent quite a bit of time working in Lean, which is also an education unto itself. And then most recently, a few years doing technical sales, which is really great because you get to see a lot of different types of engineering, a lot of different types of processes, and I think it's probably been the most educational part of my career so far. But yeah, that's my work experience, but I also do a bit of engineering at home. I'm involved in model engineering. I've built some small engines. I have small CNC machines at home, usually retrofitted by myself, so pretty well pickled in engineering by now, I think.
So it is a fair assessment to say you are an engineering geek.
Well, yeah, a geek is not a bad word, so I'll have that. Thanks.
And we'll touch on your hobby actually at home, because some of the stuff that you actually make is absolutely fantastic. It's brilliant. So next, Alex, same with you really. Why did you get into engineering, and can you tell our listeners a little bit about you? Yeah, and your role at First MTA also.
Yeah, so I've been at 1MTA for 8 years now, I believe. I started straight out of university, studied mechanical engineering, really liked the manufacturing side of that. So First Machine Tools was kind of a very logical local company to join. So started with them originally as a technical engineer, doing a lot of kind of product support, but also working closely with Gio when he did work there on kind of technical projects, technical solutions. Yeah, exactly. So did a lot of that. Then eventually kind of found that I did like being quite customer facing, speaking with customers, learning more about their problems and trying to really find the solutions for them. So slowly made my way out onto the road and kind of been doing that ever since. So.
I mean, yeah, First MTA Machine Tools, you know, it's such a good company to learn at, isn't it? And there's so many facets to the business, you know, not just standard work holding, but special work holding solutions too, which we will touch upon during this podcast. Now, Rowan, you know, this is your second podcast now, but again, can you kind of tell our listeners, you know, why you got into engineering also?
Well, I did my apprenticeship from the age of 16 at a company called Newman. So they obviously do make rotary tables that are competitors to our first MTA, but I'm very grateful for the amount that I learned there. I was at the Innovation Centre, which was kind of an R&D centre I ran basically a different machine tool every day, doing cutting trials, doing customer demos, doing kind of almost turnkey solutions, designing maybe parts for Nick in internal R&D. So I'm very grateful for the range and breadth and depth of knowledge that I gained from that work, and that really set me off for hopefully quite an interesting career here.
I think they're very similar companies, and I think that, you know, the purpose of this podcast is to educate and to add value to our listeners. And I can remember, you know, I used to be real good friends with Andrew Clark that was at Nicken, and we discussed the rotary tables. The actual castings of the rotary tables are I believe, the same in some models. You know, two very nice Japanese companies, great product portfolio, and the products can really add value to an end user's machine tool. Now, Alex, going to start with you on this one, really. You know, the purpose of this podcast is to really try and emphasise the different ways in which you can kind of maximise your machine tool's productivity and efficiency through work holding solutions. So, you know, let's start with you then. What do you think of this? And maybe let's start with the pain points. What pain points do you see out there, and what are the solutions that you can offer?
So when it comes to work holding, what we find with machine tools is, you know, ultimately, like you've said at the beginning, you're only as strong as your weakest link. And, you know, a lot of customers out there will be using kind of standard vices, bits and pieces like that, which means that potentially on a small cycle time or something like that, the operator doesn't get a chance to actually walk away. Which makes it very labour intensive. I mean, so some of the stuff we would do, for example, I mean, seeing as we just touched on rotary tables, is, you know, something like a VMC, as much as you can then put a rotary table on to create more access to different sides of the component, what you can actually do with that is build away from that. So one of the things that we offer, for example, is a chick indexing system, which allows you to put a column on a rotary table. Now, that doesn't only allow you more access to different sides, adjacent side machining, it also allows you to present more parts to the spindle. So you're getting kind of, a bit more loading time, but you're getting that opportunity for the operators to then walk away, go do something else, and that machine then carries on running. So you're getting that efficiency that you wouldn't necessarily see on that machine if you just lined up a few vices. So there's definitely many different ways of doing it.
So I think when you've got short cycle times, then it's a good idea to try and improve the maximum kind of surface area of your parts, and you're doing that by adding basically kind of a horizontal column onto the rotary, which I've not really seen that much of. I've not seen the chick indexing system.
There's a technical corner coming soon on the Chick System 5, and that was one of my favourite products, the ISS, that you could mount onto a 3-axis machine tool, because the productivity gains that you're achieving from that small investment are just unbelievable, you know, absolutely astronomical. And I think that not only are you doing your adjacent side milling, but because you've got the 4 sides, you're actually, you know, if you're using two faces to do Op1s, and you can load as many components as you can physically fit into them 2 faces, the other 2 faces of the cube to do your Op2s, effectively you're doing 6-sided work in one cycle, and the amount of components that you can fit into the machine envelope. So it's just, and even to the degree that I can't believe, people have been buying fifth axis machine tools to do prismatic work that's not full fifth axis simultaneous when they're just doing 4+1. And these are the kind of things, again, going back to education and like you mentioned, picking the right machine tool for the work holding and vice versa. Rich, you're out in the field a lot. You've been travelling the Northern Territory predominantly, if that's correct. There's so many different ways to skin a cat, and you can still make the same component, but there are better ways than others and more profitable ways than others, and you can do them in a lot less operations in a lot of circumstances. What's your opinion on this?
Well, I've noticed, if you take, for instance, something like what a lot of people would look at as a 5-axis sort of workpiece, where you need to hit all 6 sides of a job and you'd like to maintain a good relationship between the operations. I mean, a lot of the time when you see people using 5-axis machines, they use a centric gripper of some kind and they just clamp a single workpiece. Whereas another way you could do that is by having multiple operations on a table on a simple 3-axis machine and maximizing your working area. Now, a lot, though, depends on your priorities. You have to ask simple questions like, how many of these do I have to do? Are they repeat jobs? If it's a job where you're expecting to do a lot of parts and repeat very often, it might be more efficient just to use a 3-axis machine and cover the entire table with workpieces. Whereas if it's a lower volume or it's a job you don't expect to repeat very often, you might be better off in a 5-axis machine.
Automating the 5-axis machine.
Exactly. And these are all questions that really need to be asked before you even buy a machine tool, really.
Absolutely, 100%.
It's not, if you've already bought the machine tool and then you're deciding how you're going to do the work in it, you're already a step behind because you end up going down the wrong route.
You're limited to what you can do.
Exactly. You are limited to what you can do, and you end up finding that out when you've already dedicated, obviously, a large amount of capital to purchasing a machine tool and the work holding, and when it's quite difficult to then undo all of that if you need to, if you find that you're not getting the productivity that you expected.
So why are people making this mistake far too often, in your opinion?
Well, it's interesting because, to me, you have to treat the whole thing as a single entity. The work holding, all of the equipment you use in your machine tool, your cutting tools, your programming systems, it all has to be treated as one thing. And the work holding is really front and center in that, because to a large degree, it's the work holding that determines the method you're going to use to produce your workpieces. So you really need to consider that at the same time as considering the machine and the method you're going to use to manufacture, and which is easy to do if you know exactly what you're going to do in that machine tool.
But sometimes you don't.
Exactly, sometimes you don't. So then your priorities change. Then your priorities go from having work holding that gives you multi-component clamping to work holding that gives you the most versatility, so you can deal with whatever's going to come in the door that day. So as long as you know what those priorities are, you can then treat the whole thing as a single entity.
So effectively, Rich, the complete process.
The complete
Looking at
process.
the complete process. And as Alec alluded to, you're only as strong as your weakest link. The machine tool is effectively the blank canvas, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And then everything that you put in the machine tool is what makes it sing and dance to really maximise or get the most out of the machine tool or use it to its maximum capability. Alex, again, you've been on the road, quite a bit recently, and you've actually seen real life examples of end users effectively choosing the wrong machine for their applications. Again, same question to you. Why do you think this is?
So I think sometimes, I'd say quite often, you see it in terms of maybe it wasn't necessarily the amount of planning, maybe the business has grown quite substantially very quickly, and now they're thinking, we need new machine tools and we need them quickly. Now, we're seeing it particularly a lot at the moment that, the machine tools aren't readily available, so customers end up compromising on what they take purely down to what's available at that time. So, let's say they go to buy a 5-axis machine and they want something with a, 400 millimeter bed or something, and they go, well, we don't have that, but we've got something 500 mil, and you think, okay, bigger's better, so you go ahead with that. Now the problem is if you've got those smaller components, you've got smaller work holding. Now, if you've got 500 millimeters of table in the way, trying to get those clearances to get those sides and do that prismatic machining just becomes so much harder. So you start building away from the table, risers and extended tools, bits and pieces like that, and then suddenly you're kind of at risk of kind of inaccuracies, building inaccuracies into your process because you haven't taken the time to really think about, well, what are the consequences of going bigger? How does that limit me on the jobs that I might do more often?
So getting the right machine for the part is obviously a very important part of the consideration of a new project or a new set of parts to make. But I think it's interesting when Richard's obviously mentioned that you've got to think about your work holding as the key part of the process, not the machine around it. Because most machines, it's a 3-axis, it'll have a spindle, it'll have max RPM of whatever. And the work holding is actually the important bit because that's what you're programming in your CAD/CAM system or whatever if you're doing it offline. But I think it's really hard because the manufacturing process is a really complex system, and it's really hard to design everything in a straightforward way. Normally it's quite an iterative process because you might have this bit of fixturing might not work with this part, or the part changes halfway through you designing the process. So sometimes it's really hard for someone to go, this is the exact process, we've programmed it up, we've got the machine coming, we've got the fixturing coming, because they're big purchases, so they're big decisions, and you've got quite often you might have a lead time on a machine, so it might come after 12 weeks or 16 weeks. So I think it's quite easy to say, oh, you need to make sure you design the whole process before you even buy the first machine. But sometimes you have to kind of iterate and treat it as an ad hoc constant improvement. So it's all well and good saying that you can design it all from scratch, but as you probably know, there's so many things that just go wrong that you would never have even considered because it's such a complex system.
I think you can design it from scratch if you know the part.
That's
you know,
it.
So BCW up north, massive company, they will plan the work holding, the fixturing, absolutely everything before they buy the machine, so they know exactly how much Z stroke they need, exactly what spindle speed, so on and so forth. But you're absolutely right, Rowan. If you don't know the parts, or you're a subcontractor, or you don't even know what's going to be coming in the door from one week to the next, you need to have something that's flexible and modular.
And that takes, so what BCW do, I assume, is a lot of experience. I assume they've got a lot of engineering experience.
Really good engineers there.
So they're not making the mistakes that...
Shout out to Tony Kilfoyle.
All right, yeah. Good bit of shout out. So obviously I assume they've got the experience to know that, a year down the line we might have this problem with the rotary table, or we might have this problem with the machine. But if you've not got that experience...
They've got the luxury of making their own parts to a certain degree as well.
So they can control the part design as well.
They can control the process. And they've had experience of evolving that process over years too. So it's a different kind of scenario.
Yeah, but if you're a machine shop just starting up, you bought a couple of machines or you've got some parts.
It's
really hard
difficult.
to do, you know?
Yeah, it is difficult. It's a learning process and it's experience.
And that's where the versatility of your work holding solutions come in. So you can do kind of ad hoc changes even on the day, doing some programming on the control, for example.
Absolutely. I mean, a good example of that is Chick System 5, where you've got a machinable aluminium jaw that you can then replace quite a lot of fixtures with a simple jaw.
And the 0-point faceplate.
Yes, exactly. So you've got 3 options on the Chick System 5. You can have a pair of jaws holding a single workpiece, 3 jaws holding 2 workpieces, or a faceplate, which is effectively the base for a fixture on a 0-point system. So with that sort of work holding, you've got the best of all worlds. It's quite easy. I mean, there are some jobs where you're always going to be more efficient using a dedicated fixture. And those jobs will come along, but usually those jobs, it's quite predictable.
Them jobs are more like castings
exactly.
or stuff that you just need something, you just need, or even if it's something that's really thin-walled, that, you can only hold it in a very specific way. You've got to design something bespoke. But the majority of work, Chick System 5
Absolutely.
is brilliant, isn't it?
It's really good for, and even when you do need a dedicated fixture, you've got your faceplate option, so you can have a dedicated fixture that fits straight onto the Chick System 5.
Yeah.
Another thing about it, though, is it's so quick to use because you can do a setup in 2 minutes. If you have the means to preset your tools, or your cutting tools are already in your machine, and you've got your program loaded, it can take you 2 minutes to go from one job to the next job.
You're demoing this today, aren't you,
Yeah.
Richard? So again, for our listeners that are not sure or have not heard of Chick System 5 or Chick indexing subsystems, what we're talking about today, the technical corners will be, I'm not sure when this podcast is going to be released. We're actually recording it today, obviously, so I'm not sure when these technical corners will be released, but they'll be on our website and probably be on the first MTA website once they've been released too. So, please keep an eye out for them, because like Richard mentioned, they're great systems.
Yeah, and just with regards to the System 5 as well, the device itself can be a very good entry-level product, because the System 5 moves between the quick lock, which is for your standard VMC, and then you've got the indexing subsystem, which is a four-sided column. But that four-sided column is also usable on horizontals as well. So I've seen this a lot with some of my customers, where they do make this transition through, and they've started off with some System 5 quick locks, and then once they've really seen the versatility of them, they've gone, well, we'll try this on a indexer that we've got, and then moving from that point, even go as far as investing in horizontal machines when they see the levels of productivity they can get.
I mean, Alex, First MTA sells products, but it's also a solutions provider, isn't it? And I can remember when we were working together, the amount of different special projects we got involved with, where we were actually utilising System 5. So it was bespoke projects, but utilising the System 5, the face plates or the dual station jaws or whatever the case may be. And it was astounding, really, the work that we did with it. But the point I'm trying to make is that you're not just selling a product out of the box. You're actually selling solutions, and you're consulting. You're consulting. You're trying to help your clients achieve the very best results. So can you start? We've mentioned Chick and Chick System 5, but you've got and the rotary tables, the Kitagawa rotary tables. What are the products and solutions do you offer? And give me some of the examples of maybe different machine tool types, lathes maybe, where you're seeing potential pain points and improvements that can be made, and trying to avoid, educate people to avoid any potential pitfalls in the future.
Yeah, and I think that's that's the reason me and Richard spend so much time out on the road, is that consulting. We go in and we speak to people about, the problems that they might be facing at that time. I wouldn't necessarily describe myself as much of a salesman. I don't walk in and push products. I more find what the issue is and then find the solution for that, and I think that's very important. And like you said, it doesn't have to just be on VMCs or 5-axis. We work quite a lot with lathes as well. Obviously, we've got the Kitagawa products, we've got the kind of the chucking and the collet chucks, and again, it's a case of trying to find something that suits the machine tool, because the machine tool will control what work holding you can use, which is why, again, it is just so important to think about that work holding before you go through the purchase of the machine tool. For example, if you do end up with a large lathe, you can really limit how small you can go down to and what sort of clearances and what sort of accuracies you can really get on that small work. So we do a lot of work with trying to find what chucks will suit certain machine tools, even before those machine tools are purchased.
Application specific. Something I always get taken the mickey out of for saying a lot at MTD.
Yeah, so but that's why I think it's really important to have a service like you guys provide, and for most job in shops and most workshops in general to have that kind of partnership with companies like yourselves, because that means they have, instead of, because there's so much work holding out there, so much tooling, so many different machines, it's almost as if you guys can provide that. They can almost, it's like they're taking you on as a little contracted application engineer. You can do two 2 weeks of work to find the best solution for them, especially if they're not a company like BCW and they don't have that engineering experience, they don't have the same parts coming in all the time. So they're maybe working really hard just to get current parts out the door and get current processes out and make money on that. So they might send you off to try and find a good solution for the next part coming in. And it's almost like I'm not offshoring, but they're outsourcing that development work, which it's really hard to do the research if you don't know the products. Whereas you guys might see a product and then a part to make, and then in 20 minutes find the perfect solution for them, which it might take them a couple of days, which is time is money, obviously. So it's really important to have partnerships with companies like yourselves, like First MTA.
I think what you just mentioned there, you raised a really good point there, Rowan, because skill levels is a big issue. You know, not everyone has got the luxury of having, you know, very highly technical engineers such as BMW, or maybe they may only have one within their facility. So the skill levels is a massive issue. So if you can go in and, again, you're not just selling a product, you're offering a solution, that's invaluable, isn't it?
Absolutely, and we do quite a lot of that where we visit customers and talk them through the whole process of putting together a work holding package. I often get calls from customers to come and see them when they have problems, when they have work pieces that they're not really sure what's going to be the best way of clamping this work piece to get you know a good stable machining process. But yeah, I go in quite often for that sort of thing. I like it though when people ring me up and say, I'm running low on capacity on my machines.
Perfect.
Come and talk to me. What can we do? Because that's even before they've looked at purchasing a new machine. So we can actually include a conversation about work holding before we even look into what machine they're going to purchase. So in that way, we sort of branch out a bit from work holding. I mean, I even chat to guys about cutting tools. I talk to them about their CAD CAM systems sometimes. You know, we try and involve everything if we can.
So it's good that those guys, I think those customers are probably the ones that are probably the most competitive in the workplace, because they've not got that, maybe a sense of misplaced pride that they know everything and they have all the knowledge they will ever need under their roof. It's good that they can then be a bit humble and say, look, I've got this workpiece, I don't know how to do it. Have you got any suggestions? And they probably do that with a few other companies, and they can then get the best answer.
Sorry, everyone. This is getting into a really good podcast, but there's some people don't even know that they've got a problem until it's pointed out to them, and that is a really big issue, because a lot of companies have always made parts in a certain way, and a lot of companies are reluctant to change because they've created a process that they think works for them, but it's not a competitive process. And with technology always and continuously evolving and moving on, a lot of companies are getting left behind. So, you know, it's our jobs in the industry to be able to go out into engineering facilities and find these improvements, if you like. And it's, you know, a lot of, we've got the luxury of going out to so many different workshops, but a lot of these engineers are cocooned within their own facility and they don't really know everything that's available to them. And you, as you mentioned, Rowan, as well, you know, there's so many different cutting tool products, so many work holding products, so many machines. It's how do they know the right solution for them?
Well, they can't be expected to, and I think that's the point we're trying to make here.
Definitely the point, isn't it? Yeah.
Exactly.
So I mean, if you can't be expected to, then but you need to also you need to recognise that as a customer. You need to go, okay, have a bit of humbleness. Maybe say, look, I don't know everything that's on the market. Please tell me what you think. And they don't have to take your word for face value. They can see probably that you're a good engineer, so they'll see that maybe get a few other options, and then they've got a reasoned and then that kind of multiplies their knowledge by 10 times, doesn't it? It's like a multiplier. It's like a
Yeah, and I think that's a key thing, is specialisation, like you were saying. I mean, by no means would I ever walk into a workshop and try and tell someone on a machine how to go about machining their component. That's not what I specialise in. But what we specialise in is work holding, the same as you would have a cutting tools person in to have a look at the tooling that you're using, because ultimately it's not the machine tool operator's job to know all of this. You have to fall back on relying on other people's knowledge for that, and that's ultimately what we're there for, is to kind of look at things and kind of impart what we know in as much detail as possible in a narrower scope than if they tried to research it themselves. You know, there's so much to cover. Where do you start? So
yeah, because your operator's probably working really hard trying to get jobs out the door right now. They've not got time to start thinking about it because they're working flat out.
Catalogues and stuff like that.
Exactly. It's one of the things I like to tell people is nobody knows, because we have a vast product range, and nobody knows our product range as well as we know our own product range. So if you're looking for a solution, a work holding problem, the best thing to do is just give us a ring, and we can pop in and have a chat, and it won't cost you anything for me to be there just to have a look at the problem you want to solve and show you a few things that you might not even know exist.
So free consultancy.
Exactly. It really is. And the number of times people have made improvements that haven't just added, improved a job by 10 or 15%, but had sort of 150% productivity improvements in a job just by changing small things. and in ways that they didn't even know were possible. And not because they don't know their own job. It's just because things move on. New products come out. You can't be expected to know all of that when there are experts out there who do. Just ring the expert, they'll come in and we have a chat.
And you know what? You guys, when you're selling work holding, you do need to have knowledge of the machine tool. You
Absolutely.
do need to have knowledge of cutting tools. You know, vibration is a killer, so you need to eliminate vibration through the work holding so the cutting tools can do their job. But having that machine tool knowledge is absolutely imperative at all. I mean, we've got databases. You've got databases of machine tools, the strokes, so on and so forth, the dead zones on horizontal machines, the swing diameters. This is invaluable information for when you are going in to a client, Alex.
Yeah, no, definitely. And the databases we hold are massive. You know, no matter what the machine supplier, you know, whether you're looking at lathes, horizontals, 5-axis, we hold as much information as possible because that lets us make the decisions as easy as possible. There's no hold-ups by having to get lots of information from different suppliers. By keeping all of that information together, it just makes us more efficient, which ultimately makes the process more efficient. So, yeah, very important.
Yeah, so I guess, I mean, I've never seen any of these kind of databases before. I've never worked in the machine tool applications looking for solutions and whatnot. But I guess that's really important when you're going into a workshop and you don't know what these machines are, what they're like. You can do a bit of research beforehand. Make sure that you're going to offer the right solution. You're prepared for what the customer might need.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, and that means that we tailor our work holding packages to suit that machine tool as well. And it also allows us to come up with custom solutions if a piece of work holding wouldn't necessarily normally suit that machine tool. We can make that work, and we have the information there to be able to do that.
Yeah, it's also worth mentioning that the people who work at First Machine Tool Accessories come from engineering backgrounds, not necessarily sales backgrounds. So they already have quite a good knowledge of various types of industry processes, mainly centered around CNC machining. So usually when we go in to see a customer, we already have a good understanding of what they're doing and what they're trying to achieve, far more than someone who has a purely sales background.
I think that's imperative, though. I don't think you could do your job properly if you didn't.
Well, absolutely, and it's about being able to look at everything, not just a narrow bit of the work holding, but how it integrates into the machine tool, how it relates to the cutting tools in use. You know, the simple things like the knowledge and the experience of the operator, and how that relates to the usability of the work holding, how easy it is to use. You know, all of these things need to be considered if you're going to put the right bit of kit on the right machine, and the customer's going to get exactly what he wants. Because at the end of the day, that's what we want. We want happy customers, because then we have repeat customers. And we have a lot of repeat customers.
Excellent point. Excellent point, Richard. And we unfortunately, we're coming to near the end of this podcast, but we could go on and on about this subject, I believe. I think it's been an absolutely great subject. For me, my final point is going to be aimed at you, Richard, really. You've done a guerrilla demo in the studio yesterday.
Yeah,
do you do that on site? Do you do that on site when you're out and about?
Every time.
No, brilliant. And any last thought, guys?
No, I think we covered it well. As you said, we could probably go on for another half hour about this. I mean, there's so much to talk about, but
nothing to stop us doing a part two.
Yeah.
No, you can always improve the process. I don't think it's ever perfect.
Yeah,
100%. I think there's not such thing as perfection. Doesn't
There's
exist.
so much complexity involved.
Doesn't exist. Perfection doesn't exist. Yeah. Guys, been an absolute pleasure. Any last thoughts, Mr. Evans?
No, I think we've covered it quite well.
Well, on LinkedIn you can watch Richard's guerrilla demo if you're wondering what the hell we're on about. But no, it's been an absolute pleasure, guys. Thanks very much for joining us on the MTD podcast. I hope that it's been very educational for our listeners, and I'm sure that it has been. Until next week, the MTD podcast.
Thanks for listening to the MTD podcast. If you found value in this episode, please subscribe and leave a rating and review. Find more episodes on mtdcnc.com.